Those Days with the Monsters, Part 25. The room was quiet and dark. Kirrel didn't know how long he had sat there trying to understand the Khumans. Had he ever had someone want him to be happy, not because it would help efficiency, or because it reflected well on the clutch, but just because? Was that even possible? Didn't make sense. No one was so open with their goodwill. After what felt like far too long, Kirrel stood and went to the window. The world outside was strange and shifting, things simultaneously far too close and far too far away. Kirrel caught his breath as the surface of a star whisked past, no further than the ship's length away, but so far that he had to strain his eyes to see the star at all. So this was what it looked like when a ship moved through jump. He'd never really looked at it before. He probably shouldn't be looking now either, but it was fascinating to see space make no sense. A beam of light darted past, looking like a cloud of bright gas. Kirrel felt something dripping from his nose, but he couldn't see it. It was too far away. A warm weight landed on his shoulder. A calloused hand. Kirrel knew that hand, and he knew that he was about to fly through the air onto the mat again. His eyes focused sharply in a panic. "Hey, can you see me, kid?" Alex's face swam into view, her eyes looking anxious and angry. Kirrel flinched back a bit.
"Alex, did I do something wrong?"
Alex seemed to catch her breath a bit, and then her tough arms started squishing Kirrel's chest slightly as she locked him into them. "Damn you, kid. Don't you know not to stare at jump space?" Kirrel's frills pulsed teal and purple.
"Is this a normal thing for Khumans?"
"Yeah, pretty normal." Dopey was sitting at one of the tables. Beside him, Sleepy's head was in his hands. Kirrel stared for a moment, wondering why Sleepy's shoulders were shaking. Come to think of it, Alex's breath was hitching slightly.
"Are you sick, Alex? Do you need to find Doc? What's happening?"
"Yeah, worried sick. Seriously, kid." Kirrel wasn't sure what worried sick meant, but he felt that this might not be the best time to ask. "Took us a half hour to get you back. Didn't anyone tell you not to look too long at jump space?" Kirrel's frills turned a deeper purple.
They mentioned it on the way to Core 5, but I didn't have to worry about it too much. There weren't any windows where I was."
Apparently this was critical information that he'd managed to completely forget. How utterly embarrassing. "Didn't want the liability, probably," Dopey nodded, with an odd look. Kirrel's translator couldn't seem to decide if it was annoyance or something called rye. He had no idea what that was supposed to mean, and it probably didn't matter anyway, but there were so many questions, and he needed answers.
"Why is everything far and close when I look out the window?"
"Don't think about it." In spite of her stern order, Alex's calloused hand patted Kirrel's frill. She wasn't as good at it as Sleepy was, but it was still comforting. "Most sapiens can't handle it for long. You already stared at it for who knows how long. It's time to stop thinking about it. Ask us anything else." Kirrel tried to think of something, but all he could remember were the glimmering light clouds flying past. He tried to ask, and somehow the atmosphere he was breathing seemed to fade into jump space, until something that felt remarkably like Alex's hand smacked into the side of his face, and her voice broke through his thoughts, yelling at him. "I said stop thinking about it. You're worse than a kitten. Snap out of it." Kirrel's eyes took in the dining area again, and he blurted out the first question that came to mind.
What's a hillbilly?"
Alex seemed frozen in place, her mouth wide open. The room roared, and Kirrel's frills pulsed yellow and purple. I'm sorry, what?" Happy bared his teeth. Guessing Sleepy said it first. He reached across the table and poked Sleepy's shoulder. "Told him you were a hillbilly, did you?" Sleepy looked up, his eyes pooling with the Khumans' clear eye secretions. Did I? I guess maybe I did. Didn't I explain it to you, spaceman? He quickly swiped a hand over his face. Given the speed he did it, Kirrel wondered if Khuman eye secretions couldn't be left for too long on the face. That seemed like a strange quirk of biology, but the Khumans had many of those. Kirrel shook his head.
You said a lot of half words and then took me to get food.
The crew roared with amusement. Alex bared her teeth and answered. It's someone who's very good at living in places that are hard to live in, but isn't very cultured. Kirrel blinked at that.
Cultured?
His translator was telling him it had to do with food preservation using microbes, but that made no sense, unless Khumans preserved themselves using microbes, which might actually be the case now that he thought about it. It would explain why they had so many. He began to wonder if the secretions fed the microbes, and Sleepy was already properly preserved. That would make sense.
Right. What happened on Kazukan?
Kirrel asked hesitantly, breaking in on Alex's explanation of the word cultured that he hadn't been listening to. Oh boy, where do I start? Alex did the thing she sometimes did where she fidgeted with the fingers of her right hand. She seemed to do that a lot when she was thinking hard, or when she was unhappy with something. Kirrel wasn't sure which this was. He hoped he hadn't asked about something he wasn't meant to know about. I'll do it. That was Sleepy's lazy voice. He's the most comfortable with me anyway. You kinda scare him a bit, Hook. At least I think you do. A few members of the crew grumbled, but no one seemed to fight Sleepy's assertion. Okay, Dad, do your thing. Alex stepped back and let Sleepy take over the head pats. From somewhere in the room, Kirrel could hear whispering. Since when does Sleepy have a kid? Since right now, I think. Well, that was weird. But Kirrel couldn't focus on that discussion for long because Sleepy, after a long deep breath, began to explain. Thank you for listening to episode 25 of Those Days with the Monsters. I know it's taken a long time to come out. I'm holding in my arms right now the reason why. Bear with me, I'm still putting these together as fast as I can.